Better picks, better vibes, better MMA. We are coming back at you guys with Jared Cannonier versus Nasruddin Imavov. Fight night picks and predictions. We're going to start it off with the main event of the evening. Jared Cannonier versus Nasruddin Imavov. A lot of people are picking Jared Cannonier in this fight because Jared Cannonier is coming off of a great performance against Marvin Vettori. And he also has a win over Sean Strickland right before Sean Strickland became UFC champion. But there's a few stylistic reasons that I've come to recognize in doing my research for this fight that makes me think that Nasruddin Imavov is going to be able to maintain his range for 5 rounds, outpoint, outvolume, and evade Jared Cannonier's knockout punches for 5 rounds. Nasruddin Imavov winning this fight mainly depends on Jared Cannonier fighting in a southpaw stance. Nasruddin Imavov is an orthodox style fighter, and he does very, very well when he's fighting against southpaws, as seen in his Chris Curtis fight and his Joaquin Buckley fight. I think if Jared Cannonier decides to fight mostly in an orthodox stance, he will begin to have more success throughout the fight, and he will be able to win this fight and outstrike Nasruddin. But as long as Nasruddin is able to stay light on his feet, and he's able to move in and out with his straight punches, and he's able to out-feint Jared Cannonier, that would be the biggest factor in Nasruddin being able to outstrike and outclass Jared Cannonier for 5 rounds. I don't think that Jared Cannonier does very well against fighters with a bladed stance, as we saw in his Robert Whittaker fight. I can see a scenario where Jared Cannonier is able to outwork and he's able to get his offense going in the first 3 rounds and begin to hurt Imavov when he's tired in the 4th and 5th round. But I think in this particular case, we're going to see Imavov giving Jared Cannonier a look that he's not so comfortable with, and it's going to lead Cannonier falling back to his more tentative ways. I think he was mainly able to have the amount of success that he did against Vettori because Vettori squares up with his opponents very often, and he likes to stand in the pocket in a very hittable range. I think Nasruddin Imavov is quite more elusive when it comes to his footwork. Jared Cannonier has the possibility to catch him with that one shot and knock out Nasruddin, but I think this style matchup should work in Nasruddin's favor as long as he's able to keep Jared at bay and really begin to outclass Jared for 3 rounds so that Jared does not have the confidence and momentum going into the championship rounds. So I'm going to have to go with Nasruddin Imavov by 5-round decision, or possibly even a late 2nd round, early 3rd round TKO. Moving on to the co-main event of the evening, Dominic Reyes versus Dustin Jacoby. I'm going to be rooting for Dominic Reyes in this fight, but I think most of us believe that Dominic Reyes' chin is gone. And not only is Dustin Jacoby a well-seasoned, very mature kickboxer, he is also a very good MMA kickboxer. I think once he starts to find his range and land on Dominic Reyes, he'll be able to put Dominic Reyes out. The only way that Dominic Reyes wins this fight is if he gets a quick 1st round knockout early on in the fight, if he's able to hit Dustin Jacoby with a very good shot early on. Otherwise, Dustin Jacoby should be able to outstrike and outvolume Dominic Reyes, and we should see Dustin Jacoby eventually cracking Dominic Reyes, I would say in the 2nd or late 3rd round. Moving on to Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. Now, I don't think that Raul Rosas Jr. is necessarily the best bantamweight prospect that we have right now, but it's clear that the UFC is trying to build him up, and I think they're doing a great job by giving him Ricky Turcios. Ricky Turcios is not very technical. He is a brawler. He tends to gas when it comes to the 3rd round especially. Raul Rosas Jr., as we saw in his Rodriguez fight, he has some cardio issues as well when he's dealing with a fighter with a good gas tank. But I think he'll be able to stay more fundamental in the pocket when it comes to the striking exchanges. He's a young fighter, so he's aggressive. He still tries to stay technical when it comes to the striking exchanges, and he's very aggressive when it comes to the grappling. I think Ricky Turcios may be able to outlast Raul Rosas Jr. for about the 1st round, but I think we should see Raul Rosas Jr. getting a submission either late first round or midway through the second round. Moving on to Bruno Ferreira versus Dustin Stoltzfus. Dustin Stoltzfus recently came off a win against Punahele Soriano, who is also fighting on this card. Punahele Soriano is very much like Bruno Ferreira in the sense that Bruno Ferreira is also a very big power puncher. Bruno Ferreira being a Brazilian fighter, I'm willing to say that he's going to be more comfortable on the ground if Dustin is able to get him to the ground at some point. But either way, out of the two of them, Bruno Ferreira has much more finishing potential when it comes to knockout power compared to Dustin. Dustin really needs to play this fight the same way that he did against Punahele, and that is avoiding the power shots, being able to attack Ferreira at range, and then going in for the grappling combinations and getting the submission. Bruno Ferreira should be able to stuff Dustin Stoltzfus takedowns for the most part, and I think once this fight stays on the feet, Bruno Ferreira will be able to find the finish, and Dustin Stoltzfus, as we know, does not have the best chin. Moving on to Julian Marquez versus Zachary Reese. Now, Zachary Reese is a very tall, rangy fighter, but from what I've seen from him, he doesn't seem to be very athletic. This fight is really a toss-up, if you ask me. Zachary Reese was defeated by Cody Brundage, and that always makes me lose confidence in a fighter if they've been beaten by Cody Brundage, so I'm going to go with Julian Marquez in this fight. Moving on to Miguel Baeza versus Punahele Soriano. Now, after seeing Punahele Soriano lose to Dustin Stoltzfus, you would think that Miguel Baeza may be able to have good defense for the first round and a half, wear the punches of Punahele Soriano, then find the takedown and submit Punahele. That will be the way for Miguel Baeza to win this fight. On the other hand, I'm not so confident that Punahele is going to make weight, and given that fact, if he misses weight, he's going to be extremely aggressive, as he normally is in the first round. And I think if Miguel Baeza is getting caught by these guys like Chaos Williams and Andre Fialho, where he's not moving his feet, getting out of range, and his chin isn't holding up to the counter shots, I can see Punahele Soriano landing one of those big shots on Miguel Baeza. Miguel Baeza is a good fighter, but unfortunately, I don't see him faring well at today's 170 division. I really see him built a lot like Jalen Turner, but I don't think he can really cut down to 155. So, unfortunately, I see Punahele Soriano knocking out Miguel Baeza, most likely in the first round. Moving on to the feature fight of the prelims, Thiago Moises versus Ludovic Klein. Now, Thiago Moises definitely deserves to be on the main card of this fight, and I'm going to have to go Thiago Moises in this fight. I'm sure a lot of people are going with Ludovic Klein because Ludovic Klein is the more aggressive, dangerous-looking striker on the feet, and that is true. If there's going to be one way that Ludovic Klein wins this fight, that will be catching Thiago Moises with a good shot and then Thiago Moises melting on the feet. However, I was impressed by how mature Thiago Moises looked in his last fight on the feet. Even though he did not go for the finish on the feet, he stuck to the leg kicks, got a leg kick TKO, and I really liked the patience that I saw out of him on the feet. For a grappler in the UFC, that is the smartest thing to do, and we've seen it work for guys like Islam Makhachev. I would look for Thiago Moises to really use his grappling in this fight, and I think he'll be able to get the submission on Ludovic Klein. But at the end of the day, Ludovic Klein could very well get the KO TKO, so that's not a bad pick either. I'm going to go with Thiago Moises. Next fight on the night, another banger that I wish was on the main card. Charles Radke versus Carlos Prates. Now, I think this is going to be the fight of the night. Charles Radke has a very, very good high guard, throws very good boxing combinations, very strong hooks when he gets his opponents backed up against the fence. Prates, on the other hand, extremely long and tall. He's going to have a big reach advantage in this fight, and he has some really good kicks to the body and some really good long straight punches. Charles Radke, if he's able to stay on his bicycle and not stand in front of Prates, he should be able to pick apart Carlos Prates and choose when to cut his angles and to throw his combinations, very much like Buckley did against Vicente Luque. If he stands in front of Carlos Prates and he stands toe-to-toe with him, he's probably going to get knocked out by Carlos Prates. I think this is going to be a knockdown, drag-out war between the two of them. I don't see Prates really being able to put out Charles Radke, and I think Charles Radke may have to rely on his grappling at some points to really get the decision win here, but I'm going to have to go with Charles Radke to win by a 3-round decision. Moving on to Brad Katona versus Jesse Butler. I'm going to have to go with Brad Katona in this fight. He's the more tested UFC veteran, and Jesse Butler, we've only seen him against Jim Miller to get knocked out in under 30 seconds. So I'm going to have to go with Brad Katona in this fight. Next up, John Castaneda versus Daniel Marcos. I'm going to actually have to go with John Castaneda in this fight. I know Daniel Marcos has the better record, but me personally, I thought Daniel Marcos lost to Davey Grant, and I think John Castaneda is going to be able to mix up his grappling, and he's going to be able to take Marcos down to be able to get the decision win over him. John Castaneda is also very tricky on the feet. He's got some hard overhand punches, and he's got some tricky kicks at strange angles. So I think Daniel Marcos is going to be a heavy favorite here. But if Daniel Marcos is not able to get the finish, I actually see John Castaneda outworking him over the 3 rounds. So I'm going to go John Castaneda over Daniel Marcos. Moving on to Cody Stamann versus Taylor Lapalus. Cody Stamann is a very basic wrestler. Taylor Lapalus has a very similar striking style to Leon Edwards. He is a southpaw. He does leave his lead leg out very far, so I could see Cody Stamann really shooting for a lot of takedowns. But as we've seen against Kalen Loughran, Taylor Lapalus has some pretty good takedown defense at times, so I could see Cody Stamann being able to secure the takedowns here and getting the 3-round decision win. But I think Taylor Lapalus is going to be giving Cody Stamann a lot of problems on the feet, because Lapalus is so good at establishing his jab and also pull countering against his opponents. And I think for Cody Stamann, who is such a bull of a fighter in terms of just swinging and moving forward, he's going to have a hard time really finding his range, and it's going to give him a hard time at setting up his takedowns. And I think Taylor Lapalus is either going to get an easy 3-round decision here, or he may actually finish Cody Stamann. So I can't believe it that we're actually picking 2 Frenchmen on this card. But if you liked the video, like the video, comment your thoughts down below, subscribe to Better MMA, always giving you the better MMA takes, the better vibes. Better MMA, we out. Peace.